"You're toxic, Dad. Stay away from my kids." Those 9 words, spat at me across my son's pristine kitchen counter, shattered 42 years of fatherhood in an instant. I felt my heart physically crack as Michael, my only son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the teenager whose college tuition I'd worked double shift to pay, the man whose house down payment had drained my retirement fund, looked at me with cold disgust in his eyes. I stood there, mouth open, the homemade birthday cake for my granddaughter Emma still in my hands. Candles unlit. The silence that followed was deafening. In that moment, I aged a decade. My fingers trembled as I carefully set the cake down on the counter between us. A pathetic peace offering to a war I didn't know I was fighting. "Michael, what are you talking about?" I managed to whisper, my voice unrecognizable even to myself. "We don't need your judgment, your criticism, or your outdated values around our children anymore," he continued, glancing toward the living room where Emma and Ethan were playing, blissfully unaware that their grandfather was being exiled from their lives. "Mom always said you were controlling." I guess she was right. The mention of my ex-wife, who had walked out 19 years ago for her yoga instructor, leaving me to raise Michael alone, was the final twist of the knife. I had given everything, sacrificed relationships, postponed retirement, worked myself to exhaustion, to ensure Michael never felt the absence of his mother. And now he was rewriting history, casting me as the villain. I drove home in a daze, my grandson's birthday presents still wrapped in the back seat. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every interaction with Michael and his family over the past year, searching for what I had done wrong. By morning, grief had crystallized into something harder, colder. I made the call to Westfield Academy at exactly 9 a.m. "This is Robert Wilson," I said, my voice steadier than it had any right to be. "I need to discuss the tuition payments for Emma and Ethan Wilson." "Of course, Mr. Wilson. We just want to thank you again for your generous support. Your grandchildren are thriving here. I'm withdrawing all financial support effective immediately," I said, "and I'd like the school records to reflect exactly why the children will no longer be attending next semester." The silence on the other end mirrored the one in Michael's kitchen the night before. "Mr. Wilson, that's $68,000 annually. Are you certain?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," I replied, ending the call before my voice could betray me. The revenge felt hollow immediately. But after 4 decades of giving everything only to be discarded, what choice did I have? If Michael wanted to cut me off from my grandchildren, he would learn exactly what that meant financially. I never thought I'd become the kind of father who used money as a weapon. Yet here I was, 3 days after my exile from my son's life, sitting in my study surrounded by photo albums I couldn't bear to look at but couldn't put away. 42 years of sacrifice stared back at me from those pages. There I was, 25 years old, holding newborn Michael in the hospital, dark circles under my eyes from working night shifts to afford the medical bills when insurance wouldn't cover all the complications. Another photo showed us camping at Yellowstone, just the 2 of us, the year after his mother left. I'd pawned my grandfather's watch to afford that trip, desperate to see him smile again. Page after page documented a lifetime of putting my son first. The Christmas I sold my beloved vintage car to pay for the orthodontist. The summer I worked 3 jobs so I could attend that prestigious science camp. The engineering promotion I turned down because it would have meant moving during his senior year. Most recently, the second mortgage I took out on my paid-off home to help with his down payment. The retirement I kept postponing to cover private school tuition for Emma and Ethan. The financial sacrifices were recorded in faded check stubs and loan agreements tucked into the back of the album, but they were nothing compared to the emotional investment. I had poured every ounce of love into being both mother and father to Michael after Caroline left. I had attended every school event, learned to braid hair for costume day, figured out how to talk about puberty, heartbreak, and college pressure, all without a partner to share the burden. "You're toxic, Dad." The words echoed in my head as I closed the album. What had I done to deserve that label? Was it the time last month when I suggested Ethan might benefit from less screen time? Or when I questioned Michael's decision to quit his stable job for a risky startup venture? Had my concern been misinterpreted as criticism? The phone rang, interrupting my spiral. It was my brother James. "I just got a strange call from Michael," he said without preamble. "Something about you cutting off the kids' school funding? What the hell is going on, Rob?" I found myself explaining the confrontation, my voice cracking despite my best efforts. "Jesus, Rob, that doesn't sound like Michael. There has to be more to this story." "What more could there be? He told me to stay away from my own grandchildren." The pain rose fresh in my chest. "After everything I've done..." "That's just it," James said quietly. "Have you ever considered that might be part of the problem?" "What are you talking about?" "All those sacrifices, the constant financial support, the house, the tuition. Did Michael ever ask for any of it?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Of course he hadn't asked. What kind of father would I be if I only helped when asked? But James continued before I could respond. "Caroline called me last week. Did you know she's back in town?" The mention of my ex-wife's name sent a chill through me. Caroline, who had abandoned her 9-year-old son without a backward glance, was suddenly back in the picture? What does she have to do with this? I demanded. She mentioned she's been seeing a lot of Michael and the grandkids lately. Said something about healing old family wounds. I thought you knew. What more could there be? He told me to stay away from my own grandchildren. The pain rose fresh in my chest. After everything I've done... That's just it, James said quietly. Have you ever considered that might be part of the problem? What are you talking about? All those sacrifices, the constant financial support, the house, the tuition. Did Michael ever ask for any of it? The question hit me like a physical blow. Of course he hadn't asked. What kind of father would I be if I only helped when asked? But James continued before I could respond. Caroline called me last week. Did you know she's back in town? The mention of my ex-wife's name sent a chill through me. Caroline, who had abandoned her 9-year-old son without a backward glance, was suddenly back in the picture? What does she have to do with this? I demanded. She mentioned she's been seeing a lot of Michael and the grandkids lately. Said something about healing old family wounds. I thought you knew. I sat in stunned silence as the pieces began to fall into place. Caroline was back, and suddenly I was toxic. The timing couldn't be coincidence. Rob, you still there? I have to go, I said, hanging up. I stared at the phone in my hand, thumb hovering over Michael's contact. Instead, I opened my banking app and looked at the tuition payment I had canceled. With 3 clicks, I could reinstate it. With 3 clicks, I could swallow my pride and continue supporting my grandchildren despite being banished from their lives. My thumb trembled over the screen. Then my phone lit up with an incoming text from Michael. Dad, we need to talk. Not about the school, about everything. The coffee shop Michael chose for our meeting was neutral territory. Not his home where I'd been banished. Not my house filled with family photos that now felt like artifacts from another life. I arrived 20 minutes early, claiming a corner table where I could watch the door, my hands wrapped around a cooling cup of black coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. When Michael walked in, the physical resemblance to his mother hit me like a sucker punch. He had Caroline's eyes, always had, but now he carried himself with her same defensive posture, chin slightly raised as if anticipating an attack. I wonder how much of her narrative he had absorbed during their recent healing sessions. Dad, he said flatly, sliding into the seat across from me. No hug, not even a handshake. Michael, I tried to keep my voice steady. I got your text. He ordered his own coffee, some complicated concoction with oat milk and flavored syrup that cost $7. The kind of frivolous expense I would have once silently judged. Now I just watched him, this stranger who shared my DNA, and wondered where I had lost him. The school called Jennifer yesterday, he began, stirring his drink unnecessarily. They were very informative about who had been paying the tuition all this time. I said nothing. Let him feel the weight of what he'd thrown away. I had no idea, Dad. I thought it was coming from the college fund you started for me, the one I never used because I got the scholarship. Would that have made a difference? I finally asked, if you'd known I was paying $68,000 a year for your children's education, would you still have told him to stay away from them? Michael flinched. That's not fair. None of this is fair, I countered, leaning forward. I've given you everything, Michael. Everything. And you threw me out of your life like I meant nothing. That's exactly the problem. His voice rose enough that the couple at the next table glanced over. He lowered it again, leaning in. You've always held your sacrifices over my head. Every decision I've made that you disagreed with, you've reminded me of what you gave up for me. That's not true, I protested. But even as the words left my mouth, memories flickered at the edges of my consciousness. How many times had I prefaced criticism with, after all I've done for you? How often had I reminded him of my financial support when questioning his choices? The night I asked you to leave, Michael continued, it wasn't random. It was after you spent 30 minutes lecturing Emma about her career aspirations. She's 9 years old, Dad, and she mentioned wanting to be an artist. You spent half an hour explaining why that was impractical and how she should consider engineering instead. Like me before I threw it all away for my hobby business. I remembered the conversation differently. Gentle guidance, practical advice. But something in Michael's expression made me doubt my recollection. When we asked you to stop, you said, and I quote, I've earned the right to have input on her future. Who do you think is paying for the education that will get her there? Michael's voice was tight. That's when I realized you don't see your financial support as generosity. You see it as purchasing control. The accusation landed like a physical blow. Was that how my son saw my decades of sacrifice? As a power play? And then Mom came back, he continued, his voice softening slightly. Caroline, I corrected automatically. She had forfeited the title of Mom the day she walked out. Michael ignored me. She told me about the control issues, how you monitored every penny, questioned every purchase, how you used financial support to keep her dependent. That's a lie. I snapped, anger finally breaking through the hurt. Your mother left us for her 25-year-old yoga instructor. She abandoned her 9-year-old son without a second thought, and now she's rewriting history to make herself the victim? She made mistakes, Michael acknowledged, terrible ones, but she's trying to make amends. By turning you against me, by helping me see patterns. He met my eyes directly. Dad, I don't want to cut you out of our lives, but I need boundaries. I need you to understand that financial support doesn't buy you the right to control us. I sat back, feeling oddly hollow. Was that really how I behaved? Had my love and protection morphed into something controlling without my noticing? The school, Michael said, clearing his throat. Jennifer and I can't afford the tuition on our own right now. The business is just starting to turn a profit. We'll have to move the kids to public school. I heard the unspoken question hanging in the air between us. Would I reinstate the tuition as a peace offering? Or was I willing to let my grandchildren's education become collateral damage in this war of wills? The answer would determine everything about our relationship moving forward. The drive home from the coffee shop felt longer than the 20 minutes it actually took. Michael's words echoed in my head, competing with Caroline's ghost and my own wounded pride. I pulled into my driveway, but didn't immediately get out of the car. Instead, I sat there, staring at the house I'd lived in for 35 years. The house where I'd raised Michael alone. The house I'd remortgaged to help him buy his own. Financial control. The accusation burned like acid in my chest. Inside, I went straight to my home office and unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk. The folder inside contained all the financial documentation of my support for Michael and his family over the years. Tuition payments, the down payment loan agreement, which I'd never actually expected him to repay, the trust funds for Emma and Ethan, the life insurance policy naming them as beneficiaries. My hand hovered over the phone. One called to reinstate the tuition payments, and perhaps this rift could begin to heal. The grandchildren I adored wouldn't have to change schools mid-year. Michael and Jennifer wouldn't face that financial strain. But something stopped me, the same stubborn pride that had driven me to cancel the payments in the first place. If financial support was truly my way of exerting control, as Michael claimed, then wasn't this exactly what he wanted? To break free of that control? I remembered Caroline's smug face the day she left, how she'd accused me of similar things. You think money is love, Robert. It's not. She'd walked away from our joint accounts without a second thought, leaving me to raise our son alone. Now she was back, poisoning Michael against me with the same accusations. My fingers reached for my checkbook instead of the phone. I wrote out the full amount for the next semester's tuition for both grandchildren, then set it aside. Next, I pulled out a legal pad and began to write. Dear Michael, I began, then crossed it out. Too formal. Michael, I tried again. The letter took me 3 hours and 7 drafts to complete. When I was finished, I had outlined a new arrangement, one that would test both my ability to let go and Michael's accusations about my motives. I would pay the next semester's tuition directly, but after that, I would establish an education trust for Emma and Ethan. The trust would be irrevocable and independently managed. Michael and Jennifer would have no access to the principal, and neither would I. The money would be there for the children's education through college, but none of us would be able to use it as leverage. Additionally, I would forgive the down payment loan that had always been a gift in my mind anyway. I would transfer the deed to the lake cabin, the one place I kept as my own sanctuary, into Michael's name as well. And finally, the hardest part, I would step back. No unsolicited advice about the children's futures. No financial commentary on Michael's business decisions. No, I told you so if things went wrong. It was the most difficult form of revenge I could imagine, proving Michael wrong by giving him exactly what he claimed to want. Freedom from my financial control, without strings, without leverage. The next morning, I called my attorney and set everything in motion. The paperwork for the trust would take a few weeks, but the tuition check and the letter explaining my decisions would arrive at Michael's house tomorrow. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a strange mixture of loss and liberation. I was relinquishing the tools I had used, consciously or not, to remain essential in my son's life. Without them, would there be anything left of our relationship? Would Michael still want me around when I had nothing left to offer but myself? The revenge, if you could call it that, wasn't withdrawing support as I had initially planned. It was in giving more generously than ever before, but differently, in a way that forced both of us to confront the true nature of our relationship beyond the financial ties. I dropped the envelope in the mailbox and raised a flag. Whatever came next would be on new terms, not dictated by my wallet, but negotiated through more complicated currency of mutual respect. That night, I dreamed of Emma and Ethan. In the dream, they were running toward me across the lawn of the lake cabin, their faces alight with the simple joy of seeing their grandfather. There were no dollar signs between us, no power struggles, no Caroline whispering poison in the background, just family. I woke with tears on my face and reached for my phone. The screen showed a text from Michael, sent at 1:23 a.m. Dad, we need to talk again, in person. Tomorrow. I chose my home for our second meeting. If we were going to rebuild anything from the ashes of our relationship, it needed to start here, among the memories both painful and precious. I spent the morning cleaning, not just straightening up, but actually purging. I boxed up the guilt-laden photo albums and financial records, storing them in the attic. This conversation needed to happen in a space not cluttered with evidence of past sacrifices. Michael arrived precisely at noon, looking exhausted. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally immaculate button-down was slightly wrinkled. Jennifer was with him, which surprised me. She'd always been polite but distant, careful to maintain a neutral position in the occasional tensions between her husband and me. Today, she carried a large manila envelope and wouldn't quite meet my eyes. Dad, Michael said as I opened the door. No hug, but his voice had softened from our coffee shop confrontation. Come in, I replied, stepping aside. I made lunch. We can't stay long, Jennifer interjected quickly. The kids are with my mother. An awkward silence fell as I led them to the living room, where I'd set out sandwiches and iced tea on the coffee table. None of us reached for the food. I got your letter, Michael finally said, and the check. I nodded, waiting. The ball was in his court now. Dad, he started, then stopped, looking at Jennifer. She pulled a document from a manila envelope and set it on the table between us. We went to see a financial advisor yesterday, she said quietly, after your letter came. I glanced at the document. It was a detailed budget, their monthly income and expenses laid out in neat columns, with projections for the next year as Michael's business grew. At the bottom, highlighted in yellow, was their plan for the children's education, a combination of part-time public school and supplemental programs they could afford on their own. "We're returning your check," Jennifer continued, pulling an envelope from her purse. "My unopened check for the next semester's tuition." "I don't understand," I said, looking between them. "You said you couldn't afford the private school." "We can't," Michael confirmed. "Not Westfield. But we can afford to give them a good education our way. That's what we wanted to show you." I stared at the budget again, noticing now the careful planning, the realistic sacrifices, the priorities clearly reflected in where they chose to allocate their limited resources. "This is our way of saying we don't need your financial support anymore," Michael said, meeting my eyes directly. "Not because we're rejecting you, but because we need to do this ourselves." The word stung despite their gentle delivery. After decades of being needed, essential, I was being told I was superfluous. "What about the trust?" I asked, grasping at the one piece of my plan they hadn't addressed. "The education trust for Emma and Ethan's future?" Michael and Jennifer exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "We've been talking about that all night," Jennifer admitted. "It's incredibly generous, and it would secure their college futures in a way we might not be able to. But," Michael added, "we need to know something first. If we accept the trust, does that mean you're out of our lives? Is this your parting gift?" The question caught me off guard. "What?" "No, the trust was meant to remove the financial element from our relationship, not end it. But in your letter, you said you would step back." Michael pressed. "What does that mean exactly?" I took a deep breath, suddenly understanding their concern. In my determination to prove I wasn't using money for control, I had overcorrected, making it sound like I was withdrawing not just financial support, but myself as well. I meant I would stop offering unsolicited advice. I clarified. Stop using my financial support as a way to influence your decisions. I didn't mean I wanted to stop being part of your lives. The tension in Jennifer's shoulders visibly eased. "That's what I told him you meant," she said, the first genuine smile of the day crossing her face. "What about Mom?" Michael asked, the question hanging between us like a live wire. I carefully set down my glass of tea. "Your mother made her choices a long time ago. If you want her in your life, in the children's lives, that's your decision. I won't try to interfere with that. Even though you think she's manipulating me." His tone was challenging but not angry. Even then, I confirmed. "You're a grown man, Michael. You can evaluate her claims and her character for yourself." He nodded slowly, processing this. "The things she said about you, about the financial control, they resonated because there was some truth there, but the way she presented it wasn't fair. She left out her part in everything." This admission, that he could see through at least some of Caroline's revisionist history, loosened something tight in my chest. "Dad," Michael continued, leaning forward, "I need you to understand something. When I said stay away from my kids, I didn't mean forever. I meant in that moment, after you'd spent half an hour crushing Emma's dreams and wouldn't stop when we asked you to. I was angry and protective, not cutting you off permanently." "Then why didn't you call?" I asked, the hurt still raw. "It's been weeks." "Pride," Jennifer answered for him. "The same pride that made you cancel the tuition instead of calling us." She gave her husband a pointed look. "You two are more alike than either of you wants to admit." A startled laugh escaped me, and after a moment, Michael joined in. The tension in the room dissipated slightly. "So, where do we go from here?" I asked when the laughter faded. "Sunday dinner," Jennifer suggested. "Here, every week. No financial discussions allowed, just family time. The kids miss you terribly. And the trust." I pressed, needing clarity. Michael sighed. "We'll accept it, with one condition. You remain actively involved in their lives. Not as a checkbook, but as their grandfather, the man who teaches Ethan to fish and listens to Emma's stories. The trust is for their future, but they need you in their present." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. Not tears of hurt or anger this time, but of cautious hope. I'd like that. I managed. We spent the next hour outlining new boundaries. What was helpful involvement versus unwelcome interference. How to communicate when tensions arose. How to navigate Caroline's reappearance without creating loyalty conflicts with children. As they prepared to leave, Michael hesitated at the door. Dad, about what I said that night. It's okay, I began, but he shook his head. No, it's not. I was wrong to say it that way, and I'm sorry. He stepped forward awkwardly, then pulled me into a brief, stiff hug. See you Sunday? Sunday, I confirmed, watching as they walked to their car. The revenge I had initially sought, financial punishment for emotional hurt, now seemed petty and short-sighted. The true victory wasn't in withdrawing support or even in giving it more generously. It was in finding a way forward that honored both my role as a father and grandfather and Michael's autonomy as a parent. As their car pulled away, I realized that the most powerful form of revenge against the pain of rejection wasn't retaliation at all. It was resilience, the willingness to rebuild, to adapt, to find new ways of loving that didn't repeat the patterns of the past. I went inside and opened my calendar, writing Sunday dinner with family on every weekend slot stretching into the future. Then I picked up the phone to call my attorney. The trust would proceed, but with modifications. It would stand as a safety net, not as a substitute for the more important inheritance I hope to leave my grandchildren. The example of how to heal a broken family, one Sunday dinner at a time.